Choosing where to move abroad can be an exciting but also a stressful task. There are so many things to consider, and sometimes it might all just feel too overwhelming or even deter you from making the move altogether. For anyone who is new to my channel, moving abroad is not new to me. I moved to China back in 2018 to teach English for a year. Then I backpacked around Asia, Australia, and New Zealand for 6 months. Then I took an English teaching job in Prague, then another one in Vietnam, then spent nearly a year working remote and traveling Turkey, Eastern Europe, and South America before moving to the UK last summer in 2023. So all of that to say, I am no stranger to moving or traveling abroad, but moving is definitely a different ballgame compared to just traveling abroad. There's just so much more to consider, of course. So first up is the visa. This is the most difficult part about moving abroad and the most just frustrating part. So you want to take a look at how difficult this process is going to be for the destination that you're trying to move to, and this will coincide with your job choice. So if you work remote and you're looking to keep your current job and move to a new country to live, there are tons and tons of countries around the world that are offering digital nomad visas now. As long as you provide your working contract with your salary and it's over their monthly minimum salary requirement, it'll be easy enough. If you're planning on teaching English somewhere, most countries in Asia or South America, it's super easy to get a working visa through the company that hires you, because normally they have to prove to the government why a local cannot do that job and why they're hiring a foreigner to do that job instead. So since it's an English teaching job in a non-English speaking country and you're a native English speaker, it's pretty simple. But in a lot of popular destinations across Europe, teaching English abroad can be quite difficult because they tend to still only hire English teachers if they have a European nationality, so they don't have to sponsor you. So if you want to teach English in Europe, I'd look into teaching assistant programs. I know Spain is a popular location for it. My brother-in-law is doing that right now, and you're able to stay in the country for a year on a student visa rather than a working visa. So decide what job route you're looking for and what your visa options are, because that will limit your search right off the bat. For more information on the easiest visas for US citizens to get, check out this video. Next is the cost of living. This is hopefully a no-brainer, but you want your cost of living to be quite low. You never want to have to worry about money, especially when you're living abroad and you just are trying to travel and enjoy yourself as much as possible. So make sure you look up housing, food, and transportation costs of the cities that you're looking into so you can see which option will be the least stressful in regards to money. And this point goes hand in hand with my next one, which is looking at salaries. Of course, you want a high salary. Duh, who doesn't want to make a lot of money? But it's all relative. Don't compare salaries to the current one you have back home. You'll be very disappointed and depressed if you're on a US salary. And make sure to not just look at the number, but also compare it to the cost of living research that you've just done. So for example, you might have been offered a higher salary to work in Japan, but just know your cost of living is going to be crazy high too. So you probably won't save as much or travel as much. Whereas the cheaper salary in Vietnam comes with crazy low living expenses, so you'll still be able to save and travel a lot even though it's a lower salary. So just do the math and compare everything to make the most informed decision. Don't just base it off of the number of the salary, because there's a lot of things to consider. My first teaching job I ever took was in Chongqing, China, and my starting salary was $2,200 US a month, which as an American you'd think, oh my gosh, that's so low. But the taxes were so low and my cost of living was even lower. It was just insanely low since I wasn't in Beijing or Shanghai. I was in a tier 2 city. My 2-bedroom apartment in a gated community was $350 US that I split with Nick. So only $175 each. Bills were less than $30 a month, and my food was usually $1 to $2 per meal. So out of all my jobs in the world, even ones where I'm making triple that salary in the US or UK, I actually saved the most money that year that I lived in China because the salary to cost of living ratio was just incredible. So just keep that in mind. It's not just the salary number. Next is safety, and this is a big one, especially for women. You do want to do extensive research on your location and the culture overall. Do they welcome foreigners? How do they treat and respect women? Are there high levels of crime, both in the big cities and outside any places that you want to travel within the country? And make sure to get your information from people who have actually lived there. Sometimes you can research the safest cities in whatever country and see this list that makes absolutely no sense. So read a blog or watch a YouTube video from someone who actually lived there and get their take on it. Next is the ease of daily life. Having modern amenities in a city might not strike you as something that you absolutely need to think about when you're moving somewhere, but trust me, it can make all the difference. So do some research on what their apartments look like. Are they modern? What type of appliances are pretty standard in most apartments? Do they have a Western toilet? Are you gonna be using a squatty potty? Then you look at the ease of public transportation and getting around the city, the international food scene, and anything that you know will personally make you feel comfortable living there. I know everybody's different in what their comforts are and what they really need to feel comfortable. So then from there, you can actually start to make it feel like home if you have all these different things. So it's very different from the typical research you do for a city that you just want to visit, because those things don't really matter. And for me, having modern amenities and access to a lot of different cuisines is extremely important and makes me feel really, really at home in a new country. This is actually one of the reasons why we chose to live in Ho Chi Minh City rather than living in Hanoi, Vietnam, even though Hanoi is the capital, because I had chatted with people who had lived in both places and they felt like Hanoi was very traditional and old school, which is amazing for traveling there. It just like opens up your eyes to this world that you never knew existed. But having the modernity that Ho Chi Minh provided compared to Hanoi is what I wanted. So it depends what you're looking for. If you want the most authentic experience or a polar opposite life to the one that you had back in the US, you probably would have picked Hanoi. So just do your research, figure out what's important to you and what places are going to provide those things for you to make you feel as comfortable as possible. Next is Expat Community, and this might not be as important to you when you're researching at home, but I promise this can really, really affect your time living in a city. If there aren't many expats there, you might feel isolated and alone unless you can speak the native language, or maybe if your goal was to just make local friends, learn the local language, and fully immerse yourself. Again, it just depends on what you're looking for, but if you're looking to get a little slice of culture and immerse yourself in something different, but you also want to have some comforts from back home, having an expat community is going to be crucial. It's really, really nice to have lots of expat friends and feel like you're a part of a bigger community of people who are doing the exact same things as you, have the exact same interests as you, because you all decided to leave your homes and move to this foreign country to get this new experience. So if you are planning on teaching English somewhere, your school should be a great place to start in regards to the expat community. My schools, both in China and in Vietnam, had the most amazing group of expats from all over the world, and still to this day, years later, some of those coworkers are my closest friends. But if you're not planning on teaching English, or honestly, even if you do, before you go, look up some expat groups on Facebook just to see how big they are, and you can even join them to start to see the types of questions asked and things posted in your future home city. And sometimes they even organize some expat community hangout groups or meetups, so it's a really great way to meet people. And lastly, we have travel opportunities. You want to pick a country that has a lot to offer within itself, but also the geographic location to be able to travel to tons of other countries nearby for cheap. For example, before I moved to Vietnam, I got a teaching offer in South Korea. But one of my concerns with moving to South Korea was that it's so isolated. The only close trips I could do would be to Japan, which obviously would be awesome, or China. But when I go to China, I'd have to go through an expensive visa process. Otherwise, the rest of Asia is at least a 7+ hour flight away, whereas living somewhere in Southeast Asia can provide you with more travel opportunities, since Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, Myanmar, Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia are so close to one another, and it's so cheap to fly between all of those countries. So I use this logic when choosing both China and Vietnam as my teaching destination, because there's so much to do and see within the country. When I picked to teach in Prague, that decision was mostly based on the cost of living, visa, and geographic location as well for Europe, because it was in Central Europe. So I was able to travel literally anywhere in Europe easily. Even though there's not a ton to do within the Czech Republic itself, because it is a small country, it was located perfectly. So I hope these 7 things to consider when moving abroad helps you make your decision on where you want to move. Being an expat and living abroad, experiencing another country and culture is just unreal. Even if you visit that country, there's nothing like actually living there and being there on a day-to-day basis, living your normal life, going to work. And as I mentioned several times in this video, teaching English abroad is a great way to get the chance to live abroad. So check out these tips on how to start your English teaching journey.